It was not some kind of joke. There was a knock on the door, and his phone buzzed. Jack saw one of the messages from Romance Inc. that stood out at the top of all of his messages.
Irene was not a registered user. You did not fulfill the parameters of your contract. Please fill out subsection 4 of Article 12 and submit it by...
Yesterday's date. How long was he out for? There was a knocking at the door. When Jack opened the door, groggily hiding from the burst of sunlight, she was a young, beautiful woman in an office dress standing at his doorway. When Jack's phone responded with a message, the woman gestured for him to look down at it.
Peace offering. Go on a date with Amanda. All transgressions will be forgiven.
This has got to be a joke.
Jack opened the door all the way. Before he could gesture to let her in, she did just that, without a word, glance, or thanks in response.
Can I help you?
Jack heard another beep. He looked down, and there was a script waiting. No option this time. Jack said it aloud, more in disbelief than anything else.
Come right in, honey.
She didn't look at her phone. In fact, he didn't see her holding one at all. This was weird. And considering what Jack's been going through lately, that's saying something.
Go clean yourself up. You look disgusting and...
She actually sniffed him.
Yeah, you reek.
She waved him off. Jack went to say excuse you, but the phone buzzed before he could mouth it.
Why, of course, dear. Make yourself at home.
He didn't finish his breakfast or coffee, but she did. Jack came out dressed and shaved.
What's with that tattoo? It's not approved.
No buzz this time. Guess I'm allowed to speak. Long night last night.
Try again. It's been 2 days since you answered your phone. That's a direct violation of protocol.
2 days? What are you talking about? Listen, lady.
She held her hand up with a quick and curt click of her tongue.
Amanda, I have a name.
Okay, listen, Amanda. This is just a dating app. I didn't sign my soul away. I'm just paying to meet girls. I met one, and I'm still recovering from her. 2 days?
She wasn't on the approved list.
That's how I found her. Through this app.
Then she hacked it.
So, why am I being penalized?
Company policy.
Company policy? Bullshit!
Like the prompt said, we need to save face. Take me on a date and prove to me that you aren't going to compromise the program or use it illegally, and all is forgiven.
This is exploitation!
Jack was standing. She just sipped his coffee and looked Jack down.
All within the necessary paperwork.
Why do you want to date me? Why did any of the girls? What about a real goddamn connection?
He wanted to slam his fist on the table, but Jack just turned around, running his fingers through his hair, trying not to curse or scream.
That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter who you're with as long as you're attracted to them.
Was she a freaking robot? I've never heard something so depressing in my life. Are you attracted to me?
He felt insane and stood there waving his arms in the kitchen to a stranger who was going to tell him what's right and what's wrong.
You pass.
I pass? I pass. I pass. I pass.
Jack started pacing back and forth, laughing, muttering those words again and again.
I pass.
She just watches him as he stops and calms down.
So that's all it takes? Amanda, haven't you ever wanted to fall in love? Meet the one?
Irrelevant.
Jack almost wanted to smash her with something to see if she was flesh and blood. The way she looked and talked, it was so absent of feeling. Jack felt unnerved.
Mates are easy enough to find, and with an algorithm it can be proven to be successful. All it takes is the right combination of genetics, social background, personality, and income.
That's just it. Just a scientific method. Nothing beyond that?
Everything always is. I want to get some crepes. Come with me.
His phone buzzed in response to her. Jack wondered if it was less absurd just to give the phone to her.
I'd love to.
He repeated the script. Another cold walk. Amanda sized him up with a few looks. No questions. Barely any talking beyond an occasional walk faster. Jack never done something so empty before. Like the world he lived in and believed in never existed in the first place. They got crepes and coffee. She barely talked. For some reason, he daydreamed for a minute that he was on a casual date with Irene. Seeing that bright and wonderful smile seemed to be the antithesis of this woman sitting in front of him. Where was she? What did she mean by the meaning of life? Amanda insisted on seeing a horrible movie, and then they went window shopping. Or she did. That was until they passed the same pier, the boardwalk where he stood with Irene, talking of life and screaming at all the things that drove us to insanity. Jack stopped walking. His phone buzzed.
Keep moving.
The timer started. What was I doing? What was the point to all this? Irene was so passionate, so full of life. Why can't I be with her? Is this what Oscar and Susan go through every day? This absence of love? This abyss?
Jack.
No. No.
The phone buzzed again, harsher, almost like it was angry.
Excuse me?
She looked more confused than anything.
Love isn't some algorithm. What I felt with Irene was brief, insane, but it was real, goddammit!
Jack felt his phone buzz again.
Fuck this thing!
Jack threw it as hard as he could. The bay swallowed it.
Fuck dating apps, fuck Romance Incorporated, and fuck you, Amanda!
She blinked, not reacting. All she did was withdraw a phone and spoke softly into it.
We have a 318.
On our way.
The voice was clear, even from where Jack stood. Jack saw a car drive by seconds later. It nearly hit him. Two men jumped out wearing uniforms. They looked like janitors, with the words Romance Inc. plastered on the back of their white jumpsuits.
In violation of Article 23.
They read him
subsection
off the
4,
riot act,
contract
while dragging him
Romance
to the ground.
Incorporated,
Jack could
hereby
barely
find
hear
you
them between the kicks.
Violation.
Funny, he thought he saw Irene standing by the boardwalk, watching him. Snow started to fall. Amanda was talking with one of them. The man that was kicking him was now shouting,
Hold him down.
or
Hold
at
him
least
down.
that's what Jack
Hold
thought,
him down.
until he felt the shock to the back of his neck. Jack couldn't feel anything for a moment, as his world started to turn black. All Jack wanted was to meet the right girl. Life sure has a sense of humor. Jack woke up, not by choice. Being splashed with ice-cold water will wake anyone up. There was a shock to his system. Jack could feel himself rattle awake instantly, a bright light blinding him, while he shook his head, trying to orient himself. Jack saw Amanda and those two men standing over him. That's when Jack tried to move. Tried. That's the key word. A fluorescent light, the one that was blinding him, flickered above his head, buzzing. Jack was in an office, or at least a horrible imitation of one. There was an overhead projector that took Jack's attention over to his captors. There was a man who was pacing back and forth, like he was waiting for Jack to notice him. No one spoke, except the man on the video, who started off by pointing right at Jack.
I'll bet you're wondering, hey, how did I get here? I didn't violate any rules.
He spoke in a sing-song voice. It already started to drive Jack crazy.
Wrong.
His face got a dramatic close-up, followed by an equally ridiculous music track to take the point home. It would have been ridiculous if Jack didn't feel a bolt pierce through his body, causing Jack to seize up and down, twisting against his bindings.
No one ever reads the contract.
He was pacing again. He sounded more insane than angry.
Why would you ever sign something without reading it?
The announcer yelled the last part. He took a deep breath and looked back and forth, as if he knew where Amanda was standing.
Legal team, please use this time to express which articles the violator broke.
The announcer was silent, clasping his hands together right under his mouth. It was disgusting how his eyes trailed the room, left and right, as Amanda stepped up to Jack, holding out a printed version of the contract.
You see, Jack, this contract is for guaranteed happiness. To provide guaranteed happiness, there are rules and stipulations like this clause right here.
She pointed to a single paragraph. Jack glared at her, mustering every inch of hate he could express in a single glance. Then, Jack looked down.
I, Jack, by signing this contract, agree to give up my right of decision and free will.
Jack looked up. The hatred left his face. Jack could only imagine how dumbstruck he looked in that moment.
What the hell is this?
Keep reading, please.
Her face betrayed no emotion. Nothing of the sort.
As long as the Romance Incorporated contract is renewed and can verify whether or not the contract should be extended or terminated. This says I basically have no right to my own life. This can't be legal.
One of the men flashed a gun under his overalls. Amanda continued.
You're free to go to customer support.
She smiled. She freaking smiled. Go to hell!
Jack ripped at his bindings. No matter how he tugged and moved, it wouldn't move an inch. She just leaned in and whispered into his ear.
You should have just given me what I wanted.
Jack felt something stick into his arm. A needle from one of the goons. The world started to grow darker. Jack could faintly see Amanda looking at him, arms crossed.
Prep him for re-education.
When he woke up, Jack found himself in the same room. Same situation, minus Amanda and the two goons. The same dressed-up man looking at him quizzically on the screen.
Did you get it out of your system? Time to wake up, sleepyhead.
Was he watching me?
I'm here to inform you that the reason you were brought here is because you broke a cardinal rule, disobeying the Romance Incorporated contract. Why is the contract so important? Well, that's easy.
Get me out of here!
Jack shook the chair. Ripping at his bindings, he heard a voice coming from the chair. Were there speakers in there too?
That is not a good idea.
A spray hissed out, burning his nose upon contact. His eyes watered, causing Jack to cough. So much pain, but he couldn't close his eyes. The spray kept them open.
How could you reject happiness? That's what the company gives us. That's what's promised. By rejecting what's best for you, you cause a problem. You infringe on others' happiness. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Why being a part of something bigger is more important than selfish, entitled outbursts. No one should refute happiness.
You're sick! You have no right! Let me out!
Another blast of spray. Jack screamed in pain.
Let's look at Thomas. He's alone, wondering why he can't find love.
A little animation took over the screen. There was a man sitting on a doorstep, looking downtrodden, holding a bouquet of flowers.
Oh, I'll never find anyone.
But Thomas, you're not alone. There's Susie, who works at the flower shop down the street.
The announcer's voice sounded from off-screen.
She won't notice me. It's hopeless.
Thomas lowered his head even further.
What if I could tell you about a wonderful app that can set up...
How the hell did this happen? I can't move. Is this it? Will I be myself? I just wanted to find a girlfriend. How the hell did this happen to me? The spray again. God damn it. It hurts like hell.
My name is Thomas.
The animation had Thomas standing in front of a young blonde woman. Both looked like they were out of some bad 50s movie.
You don't need to introduce yourself. Thanks to the script prompt, you'll never run out of things to say or ruin the mood.
That voice is so freaking cheery.
But what if she doesn't like me or I don't like her?
That's easy, Thomas. With our star rating program, you can end the date, but at a penalty if she's having a good time.
The building shook. Jack could hear an alarm. An alarm sounding somewhere far away.
What now?
Susie, I like you.
I like you too, Tommy.
There's that annoying beeping sound again.
Sorry, Susie. The line was, I like you too, Thomas.
Gee, I'm sorry. I thought it would be okay to call him Tommy.
She argued, looking off screen.
Thought nothing. Follow the script and everything will be A-okay.
The cheery freaking voice. It gives me a headache, as if I'm not disoriented enough. And what if we don't, asshole?
Jack screamed it out before getting a mouth full of spray. There was an explosion, but he barely noticed it. Someone ran up to him, cutting him loose. Was that? He started to recognize a shape. It couldn't be. Irene?
I thought I told you to find me.
Water.
Was all he could say. Irene pulled something out of a bag she was wearing. Jack could feel a rush of relief. He coughed some water out.
What did they do to you?
Susie, thank you for the...
No, Thomas. You don't need to do anything except leave a review.
That's so easy.
Of course it is. It's our job to make life easy for all of you.
The three of them laughed while Irene cut Jack's bindings and helped him to his feet. Jack nearly collapsed, coughing, spitting out water and something yellow. She helped him orient himself.
Can you walk?
She patted Jack on the back.
I'll run if it gets me out of here.
Jack stood straight, looking at the announcer, staring back at Jack, going into another lecture.
Hey, Thomas.
I'll do anything.
Outside the hallway, the red light blaring, flashing, painting the white walls with dark crimson stains mixed with darkness. Irene helped Jack along for a minute. The world was starting to orient and make sense again. Jack saw something in her hand he didn't see before. A gun.
There! Over there!
The two men ran towards them. She fired a gun at them before they could lift their guns.
Jesus Christ!
Jack screamed as he watched both men fall to the ground. Jack backed into a wall, and a door opened. He heard the same cheery voice of the announcer.
Hey, Thomas!
There was another man in a chair, just like Jack's. He was tied and bound. His eyes were watery. That's when he turned around and saw a giant hole where Jack's door used to be.
There's more?
Jack barely uttered, his voice catching in his throat.
We have to go!
Irene yelled. Jack could hear the urgency and desperation in her voice.
Not without him!
Jack ran up to the man, struggling at his bindings.
Leave him! Look at him!
When Irene said it, Jack let go of him. The man's eyes were glazed over. He was drooling. Jack felt Irene grab at his hands. Jack resisted, still pulling at the bindings.
This is sick. How can this be happening?
Jack! Jack!
Irene pulled hard enough to make Jack face her. She hugged him. He just stood there, listening to the announcer.
Now you know the real nature of this company. Please, come with me.
Who are you?
An idiot who fell in love with you. I escaped when they went to bring us here. This isn't the best time to catch up.
The way Irene said it, there was tenderness, and even pity in her voice.
Love?
Irene smiled and looked away when he said it.
Well, I mean, later.
She looked over her shoulder.
What do we do now?
Follow me.
She handed Jack a gun.
Don't think twice. Just shoot.
Jack felt the gun's weight in his hand. Jack hadn't held one before. Looking back at the man, Jack didn't know whether he should end the poor man's suffering.
Understood.
Jack looked over towards the exit. They ran out of the room, down the hallway, crouching behind a door around the corner. 2 more armed guards. They fell quickly. Because of the alarm system, no one heard the gunshots. They took the bodies and dragged them away from the hallway, out of plain sight. Jack followed Irene's lead as they took their uniforms.
I expected more blood.
Don't worry about it. Get dressed.
Irene barked quietly. It didn't even occur to Jack that this was the first time he saw her without clothes on. He thought he must still be in shock. The rest of the escape was wholly uneventful. They barely got checked, barely got noticed, and the alarm shot off halfway throughout their way out. Jack tried to contemplate so many things, but there was no way to get any answers. So, he just walked out of the building. Until they were driving, or should he say until he was a passenger in her car. She drove normal. No death-defying turns. She kissed him as Irene stopped in front of his apartment building.
Get what you need and meet
She
me at...
wanted him to meet him at the same skyscraper where all of this started. Jack walked into his apartment. He didn't even turn around as she drove off. Jack was halfway packed and changed when someone came into his room. Oscar, with a gun.
Jack! What are you doing here? You violated the contract. You should be in re-education.
Put the gun down.
Jack spoke firmly, tapping the gun with his hand, hoping he wouldn't have to pull it out.
For Christ's sake, man, what did you get yourself into?
All I wanted to do was to meet someone, not play a goddamn game. Please, get out of my way.
Jack, I can't let you leave.
Oscar held the gun at Jack.
Why? Because it's in the contract?
Oscar shook his head up and down.
What isn't in the fucking contract?
Jack, just go back.
I'm not going back!
Re-education is fun. I went a few times myself.
The way he smiled, it made Jack cringe and step back.
Choose me or Irene.
How did you know she was involved?
Oscar only looked at Jack with a quiet determination.
I don't want to choose anything. I just want to have the freedom to have a say in how my life will be lived.
Then you shouldn't have signed the contract.
Oscar, are you insane?
Oscar fired, and so did Jack. Oscar's bullet missed Jack, but he fell onto the ground. Jack almost dropped the gun, throwing it away then and there. But then, Jack shook his head. He might need it later. Jack pocketed it and walked over to Oscar. His eyes were wide open.
I've gotta keep moving. I'm sorry, buddy. They got to you.
Jack stood at the top of the skyscraper. The same night sky. The same lights in the horizon. A cool breeze. And that pervasive feeling of emptiness. After all, has anything changed?
I found you again. You really don't like to follow directions.
Irene!
Jack turned, only to have Irene run into his arms.
I don't know what to think. I'm a murderer.
We'll get through it together. Do you love me?
Jack looked into her eyes. As soon as she said it, back at the re-education facility, he realized it. He didn't know why, but he would follow this woman to the end of the world. Maybe he already did.
I love you, Irene.
She kissed Jack the second he said it. When he pulled Irene in close, Jack felt the world evaporate around him. Only the moment mattered. Jack let go after a moment, feeling free, taking his first breath of air in a stale world, tasting every bit of color it had to offer.
I wish I met you before all this.
He felt his back hit the railing. Was there really no way out?
It'll be okay.
She reached for his arms again. Jack felt the gun against his hip.
How? We can't escape.
Jack looked into her eyes for an answer.
There's only one way out. Away from their control. Away from a world that would keep us apart.
Jack grabbed her shoulders. She kept smiling, but there was something he'd never saw before in her eyes. She looked uncertain.
We don't need to.
She put a hand on my fingertips, kissing them lightly. Jack felt a modicum of relief until he heard something more disconcerting than any other sound could have been in that moment. He heard clapping. Someone was clapping. More than just a someone.
Congratulations.
Irene leapt at him, hugging tightly.
You passed!
Jack almost fell over the railing.
You completed re-education!
This was... what?
Jack looked up at Irene, still wrapped around his chest. Amanda was staring back at him with the two goons.
What's going on?
Your file said you didn't respond well to the app. Deviations lies in expectations and love. So, we improvised a scenario to help you build a relationship based on your personality matrix. I told you love was just an algorithm.
Amanda looked happy. No. She looked smug.
This was all a script? A fake scenario?
Jack stepped back, pushing Irene off him. He tripped, hitting the edge. Jack leaned back.
I fell in love with a lie?
No! I'm real. I meant all those things. I swear to you!
There was tears in her eyes. Were they real? Was any of this? Irene stepped closer.
How do I know? How can I be certain?
You don't, but you have a guarantee. As long as you sign the dating clause, the two of you can follow the basic package and just rely on each other to sort out any problems.
Amanda responded in the most professional, business-like voice anyone could ever manage.
We killed people!
Paintball gun.
Oscar stepped out from the view, holding the gun. He was laughing.
Free will. All I wanted was a chance to fall in love and have a say in my own life.
Jack felt the railing and looked over, down towards the street. He could barely see the cars driving back and forth. The concrete that would end everything. The gun pressed in his hip, uselessly.
Me too. And I never would have found you without them.
Jack looked back to see Irene reaching for his hand.
I love you, Jack.
What do you love about me?
Jack stepped up onto the railing. The lot of them gasping, looking mortified.
I love how adventurous you are. I love the fact you care more about the fact I would actually love you versus the convenience of being told it contractually. Do you remember what I said to you on our first date?
Irene's smile persisted.
The finding of the meaning of life?
Don't you remember my answer?
Irene laughed, pushing that curly red hair out of her face. Her eyes were so green. They seemed luminous with the city lights.
I can barely remember that night.
I told you.
Irene started to say. Then it came back to him. They were sitting on the same playground Jack got rejected at previously, at 2 a.m., and they were both completely drunk.
I told you I'd show you the meaning of life.
Snow fell. It's funny. The more I think about it, the clearer it got. When the snow fell, she reached up and touched it. I watched it melt and drip down from her hands. What is it? Snow?
God, you're such a dork. No, it's right now. We can't control where the world takes us, or what's in the world, but we can control how we feel about it. I rather like snow, don't you? It's cold and wet, but it's so beautiful. Kind of like life.
I didn't realize I muttered back her words. The rest of them were silent. I looked back at the ground and then back at Irene. Maybe it didn't matter whether or not I had any control or free will. This woman was beautiful, and I loved her. I don't know what else I could ask for. Which plunge was better to take?
Romance Inc. Part 2 was written and directed by Justin Morton. Produced by Sasha Bloor. Edited by Sasha Bloor, E.S. Henry, and Justin Morton. With music and sound effects by Epidemic Sounds and Charlie Harper. Starring Morty W.K., Megan Taylor, S.H. Cooper, Lee R., E.S. Henry, Julie Bowden, and narrated by yours truly, Matt Raftis.